I have queen 9 of clubs. I'm in late position. It gets raised to 15 in front of me. I make the call, and the big blind also makes the call. We're going to a flop 3 ways. The flop comes out 10-10-6 with 1 club. First player checks. The initial raiser pre-flop bets 25. I make the call just to keep him honest. Hopefully he doesn't have a 10. And the big blind also makes the call. We're all continuing to the turn. The turn comes out the 5 of clubs, which is a good card for me because now I have a flush draw. First player checks. The initial raiser bets 55 on the turn. And if I'm going to win this pot, I need to be creative. If either of these players doesn't have a 10 and I raise here, I think I could just take down the pot. And if one of them calls, I also have outs to win the pot if they have a 10 because it's not likely they have a 6 or a 5, so I could hit the flush. I decided to raise to 225, and the next player in the big blind thinks for a bit, eventually goes all in, shoves his chips in. The other player folds, and now I only have 250 or so more to call. I definitely have to call to see if I could hit the flush, but I'm obviously behind with just queen high. The river comes out to jack of diamonds. My opponent flips over 10 jack. He had the 10. We didn't make a flush. He makes the full house, and we lose a big pot. There was a 4-outer on the river. We're on the button now. We have ace 10 of hearts. There's a few limpers in front of me. I decide to raise to 25. We got a nice hand. We get 2 players to come along. We're going to a flop 3 ways. There's 85 in the middle. The flop comes ace 9-7 rainbow. We flop top pair with a 10 kicker. Both players check to me. I continue on the flop for 35, and both players continue. We're going to the turn 3 ways. The turn is a dream card. The 10 of clubs comes out. Now we have top 2 pair. It goes check, check again on the turn. I bet 65 into 180. I'm trying to keep both players involved in the hand because most likely at this point, we have the best of it. The next player calls, and then immediately after that, the other player goes all in. I don't like the news I'm hearing. Immediately, I'm upset because I think my opponent has a set. I have an ace and a 10. What else could he really have? I don't think he has 8 jack in this spot. I don't think he has 8-6, and maybe he turned a straight. I put him on a set, but there wasn't much more money for me to call at this point, and I can't fold top 2 because then it would just be the nittiest game of all time. I didn't like the spot I was in, but eventually I made the call for all my chips. The other player folded his hand. We're going to the river, and the river comes out a 10 of diamonds. We now make a full house, and our opponent flips over pocket 7s. The hand we thought he had, but we couldn't make the fold in that spot. Our opponent takes a bad beat. We hit a 4-outer on the river, and we get a double up. I turn pocket aces into a bluff. We're in the small blind. It gets raised to 25 in front of me. I look down at pocket aces and decide to 3-bet to 100. The big blind cold calls from 5 to 100, and the initial raiser also makes the call. We're going to a flop 3 ways. The flop comes out jack 8-6 with 3 clubs. We're first to act. We're definitely going to bet in this spot. I continue for 150, hoping my opponents don't have a flush. The next player folds, and I see the other player, the initial raiser, looking at his cards to see if he has a club. He makes the call with his hand, and we go to a turn. The turn card comes a brick. It's the 3 of diamonds. When I see him look at his cards to see if he has a flush, I know at this point he doesn't have a flush. So I decide to just put him all in at this point because even if he has a jack, I want him to call, or an 8, but I know he doesn't have a flush. My opponent thinks for about 30 seconds to a minute and eventually throws his cards into the muck. I put him in a tough spot, and we take down a nice sized pot with pocket aces. My opponent put me in a very tough spot on the turn. We're on the button. It's a straddled pot of 10. I have 7-9 of hearts. I open a 35. The small blind calls. The straddle calls. We're going to a flop 3 ways, and it's a dream flop for me. 6-8-3 with 2 hearts. We flop an open-ended straight flush draw. It goes check, check to me. I bet 45 on the flop. The small blind calls, and the straddler makes it 185 to go. There's definitely no way I can fold my hand at this point, but I do have to be cautious because there's another player behind me who only has about $300, and it might open up the raising back to the other player. Given all of this, I still just flat call in this spot. The other player folds his cards. We're now headed to a turn heads up. The turn is the jack of spades. My opponent leads out out now for 280, and at this point, I don't know what to do. Any heart, any 10, any 5, and I make my hand. But after thinking it over for a bit, I decided to fold my cards because there's only one card to come, and I probably would have had to call more money on the river if it's a brick. I fold my cards, my opponent doesn't show his hand. Would you have called or gone all in with a raise? What would you have done on the turn here? This hand played out really weird. I'm in the small blind. We have king queen offsuit. It's a straddled pot. It gets around to the button who raises for 30. I make the call. The big blind makes the call. The straddle makes the call. We're headed to a flop 4 ways with 125 in the middle. The flop comes out king 3-5 with 2 spades. We make top pair with the queen kicker. I decide to check, and so does everyone else. We're headed to a turn. The turn comes out the ace of clubs, which isn't a good card for us with 4 players. It's very likely that one of them has an ace. We check again. It gets around to the button who now bets $60. I decide to call because I don't think the button has an ace. I think it's possible someone else does. The big blind folds. The initial straddler makes the call. We're now going to a river card with a lot of money in the middle. The river comes out the king of diamonds. Now I'm confident that I have the best hand at this point, so I decide to lead out on the river for 1/3 pot. I bet $100 into about 320, and both players folded their cards. I think one of them had an ace. Maybe I should have bet a little bit less or checked on the river to get paid more. What do you guys think?